This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. Arguably one of the most terrifying movies that I ever saw when I was a kid was actually made in 1973. And it's a cult horror film. I don't know. It just really scared the devil out of me for whatever reason. But the name of it was called The Wicker Man. And I think that the reason it was so terrifying was that the idea was that there were sacrifices being made, and you see this thing and these offerings that are made at the end of that movie. And it was something that really stuck with me. And not being, obviously an attendee to Burning Man, when I saw this effigy that for years now has been burned in conclusion to that event, it reminded me of the Wicker Man. I'm not the first person that has actually, talked about this over a period of time. But you know what's even more terrifying is that when life, maybe on some level, imitates art, it's one thing to maybe think about sacrifice, human sacrifice. It's completely another thing when it comes about that you have a homicide that's committed in one of the most attended events in American history for a protracted period of time. As a matter of fact, when an attendee looks down at her feet, she sees a man lying there in a pool of blood, and chaos is all around. And there are, in fact, no answers. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, I've been talking about this event, that happened out there out in Nevada, out in that high desert, the isolated areas out there. I guess it's been a couple of weeks now. I first was asked to appear on Fox and Friends about this homicide. This fellow that was in attendance and had been there. He's actually an artist. He's a Russian national, actually, who had been living in the States for some time. He was domiciled up in Washington State. And I just, they asked me what I thought about it, when I went on air with Fox and Friends, and, just kind of break it down and how complex the scene would be, how isolated it is. And I was really shocked by the comments and that I received from this. And I got to tell you, what a bunch of, pretentious, self-involved individuals, when they were making comments in regards to what my perspective was that, this is a homicide investigation.
Right.
I don't really have a dog in the fight. Whatever you want to do out in the desert, if you want to build a town and then set a big effigy on fire, right, have at it, man. Make sure that you stand back when you strike the match.
You're not going to be talking about it unless there's a reason to talk about it on network television, which means there was a murder. There's a dead body.
Yeah. I was commenting to a friend the other day. It's like, about this particular topic. And I was like, I couldn't believe the responses that I got. People.
So they were attacking you because
I'd never been to Burning Man. It's like, damn, man, I've never been to Moscow. I've covered cases that occurred there. I've covered cases that happened in far-flung places around. We just did the Mushroom Lady,
right,
a while back. And as much as I'd like to go to Australia, and the people are lovely, and
I'm afraid their government
they've been asking us to come down there, by the way.
Yeah, and
I've never been to Australia, but I can talk about a homicide, I think.
They're the kind of government that would lock me up. I'm really afraid of Australia.
Well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to get you. I got to bring you back with me. We got too much work to do.
Okay, we got Burning Man. Okay, you've got this festival that goes on a week. It's an art festival, and they've got the 10 tenets of Burning Man. And look, man, whatever you do that doesn't, it's like, you know what, Joe, you're not allowed to say I don't care anymore. I don't care what you do.
Yeah.
It's like if you're an adult in the United States of America, do what you want, man. Have at it. It's between you and your God. I don't care. And you know why I don't care? Because you're an adult. You can do whatever you want. I don't have to care. And the thing is, unless you need my permission, then why do you care what I think? It's like, we've lost this, you know?
Yeah,
so now,
they've lost the plot completely, you know, and this is kind of, I think the reaction of the guy is kind of an example of that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, what I am interested in is when I have a fellow who is a homicide victim and he's bleeding out from his neck and there are no answers. I approach this, and I don't want to give away the plot here, but I approach this almost from an academic standpoint because I'll put it to you this way. If I were to have a case that I wanted to demonstrate to my students at university about what the ultimate nightmare scenario is relative to scene security, collection of evidence, assessment, having to get resources, which is something that we actually talk about, dude, you've hit the apex here. We're at, this is a perfect example of worst case scenario. And, you know, when you work and do planning for things, you always work out worst case scenario, because it's like, if you handle worst case scenario, many times the logic goes that when other things occur, you'll be prepared for them. You prepare, you know, the old adage, you prepare for the worst. Yeah. I was on the 1996 Olympic planning committee. I was like the representative for the medical examiner way back when. And, you know, and I would go in these rooms and, you know, and listen intently to what they were talking about planning, you know, for worst case scenario relative to police and fire and ambulance services. And here I am, I'm the one medical examiner guy in the back. You know, when the Olympics came to town, they couldn't figure out how to classify the medical examiner. And we had these kind of fancy, they were an early version of a barcode digital ID that you had with your picture on it. But they had certain codes on these things to say what your role was while you have the ID, you know, and I thought mine would say medical examiner on it or whatever. We actually get our IDs the day of opening ceremony. Guess what badges they gave us and what they said on them? They didn't even have a skull and crossbones on them. They said vendor. And I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me. So
wow.
I'm an ME investigator working in Atlanta. You're talking about these horrible things that could potentially happen. And I'm the vendor. What am I going to do? Bring hot dogs to the scene? I don't know. I don't understand. And as it turned out, you know, we had the Olympic Park bombing. Yeah. And that was a nightmare because just like
you guys have a class on how you blame the wrong guy for saving lives and get him to ruin the rest of his life.
Yeah. Wow. You're going to get me started on my friend Richard Jewell here, and it won't be pretty.
I do want to get into one thing, Joe, and Burning Man, where they talk about it is a city built out of nowhere. Okay, it's 70,000 people strong, and they build an entire city. And the whole idea is you bring whatever you need for the week, and you leave. That's it. You don't leave anything behind. And I will tell you that there's a massive cleanup that goes on every year because half the participants leave stuff behind. Of course. I'm not blaming anybody for this. For anybody who's ever been to the Talladega Super Speedway, which if you drive I-20 between Atlanta and Birmingham, you see the fastest track in the world. It's an amazing sight. And every year, twice a year, there are 70,000 people camping out in the world's largest free camping area.
Just camping. Just camping. Yeah.
They got campers, they got tents, and
Yeah.
but the thing is, Joe, there is a camaraderie among the people that go. A lot of people take their vacation. 75% of the tickets are sold out of state. So this is for 2 weeks out of the year, an incredible city of over 100,000 people. All of a sudden, it becomes, I think, the third largest city in the state of Alabama for the weeks of the track. And so when I was looking at this Burning Man, the murder, because there's always deaths at the Talladega Super Speedway.
Yeah.
They are not what you would expect. A lot of times they're very odd. There's always a lot of weird stories that come out of these events, where you have a bunch of people together for a very short window. Yeah. Like at Woodstock. Do you know how many people died of drug overdoses at Woodstock? Do you know how many babies were born at Woodstock?
I've heard that there were several. I don't know how many.
Yeah.
I couldn't give
We've
you
all heard that. And it's all a lie. There was never a baby born at Woodstock. There was not an overdose death. One of the deaths actually was run over by one of the trash trucks that rolled over his sleeping bag that he was in because he was passed out. Yeah, it didn't happen the way they tell you it did. There's not one child born at Woodstock that had to be registered up there in upstate New York as a human being born there. But I tell you that because in this case, if you had told me that this is the first time they had an incident like this, where you've got a 37-year-old man who is really and truly coming from Russia to the United States of America, and I can just imagine the heart on this guy. And he's there as an artist, and he's experiencing this whole week, and it's been a great week. And as you're going to this major event that the whole week builds towards, we end up with 70,000 people hooping and hollering and doing a dance around a guy that bleeds out and nobody helps him. How does that happen, Joseph Scott Morgan?
Yeah. And I think that, first off, okay, here's what you're dealing with. And I was actually I did not initiate this, just so you know, so that everybody listening, I did not initiate this query, if you will. Somebody asked me, would hallucinogens factor into these events? Would any kind of substance that someone would have been taking? And I'm like, well, yeah. I mean, there are people that can imbibe in any number of substances that are mind altering, and the reality, their perception of reality is not what it would have been otherwise. And what I mean by that is that you can see things if you're taking some mind altering substance where you might perceive it as a threat. Otherwise, if you're just like this normal person that works in an office and you've gotten away and said, yeah, I think I'm going to do a hit of acid, or I'm going to do mushrooms, or I don't know, whatever you pick your poison, whatever it is. And it changes your worldview in that moment and in the frenzy of the crowd, because we have to understand that police believe that Vadim Kruglov, he actually may have been killed at that conclusive moment where this effigy is set ablaze. Now, this signals the end of this festival. It's like the big culmination. And, you had mentioned that there were 70,000 people there, and that's very significant. One thing I did find out along the way is that the numbers have dropped. They're not as robust as they once were. And it's probably the same, in other instances. I'm from New Orleans. My favorite thing to do in New Orleans is during the year is not going to Mardi Gras. My favorite thing when I was living in New Orleans was to go to New Orleans Jazz Fest, which by far is consistently packed to the brim with people. And as a matter of fact, I think the population that attends that has increased every year. But you know what? You got running water, you got toilets, you got some of the best food in the world, you got some of the best music, and you never know who's going to be playing. And again, you're in the desert. You got nothing. You had mentioned this for our friends out there that are not familiar. they actually construct this town out of nothing. They call it a town, but this dwelling, this temporary village, you have tents, you have campers that are out there. So you've got people that have kind of transported their domesticity, I guess, their domestic life out there so that they can survive. And Dave, I got to tell you, that in and of itself is a huge clue in this case. As a matter of fact, I'm going to reveal a bit of evidence that, in my opinion, is going to lead potentially to identification of a killer. I've tried to put myself in the shoes of an individual that has been just enjoying themselves for an entire week. After you've been in a place, it's kind of like camping. You go into a location, particularly if you primitive camp, which me and my family have done, particularly when our kids were younger. We'd go out and set up a tent and just kind of live in the wilderness, for a week or so. And we enjoyed ourselves.
I got to share a very quick story, Joe.
Yeah,
sure. About primitive camping, okay?
Yeah.
I liked to do that when I was younger. But when my back started getting bad, my kids were at that age where they wanted to camp, and I didn't want them to, forego that. And so we did. But whenever we went, I always took what I needed. I wanted them to enjoy. I wanted them to have fun. But by golly, I always had my generator. I always had my TV. Yeah. I always had a DVD player and an air conditioner. And I would tell them, you guys want to camp in the tent? It's right there. I set it up. There's a fire. We'll sit around and sing. I'll tell you some scary stories. But when you go lay down in that tent, I'm going to be back here in the back of my Ranger with my mattress, my air conditioner, and y'all can just suck it because I'm old. I'm not kidding. That's my version of primitive camping, Dave Mack style.
I dig what you're saying, man. I mean, I feel the same way. Kimmy loves to camp. It's not my jam necessarily. I got over it. Yeah. It's not something I necessarily want to do. I'm not a big fan of driving down the road in a camper because I'm terrified I'm going to wreck the thing. Oh, man. And you invest thousands of dollars. I'm very cautionary in that sense.
You would be a train wreck in a motorhome, man.
Yeah, there's no way. There's no way I could do it. I could never enjoy myself. That is so. I don't know.
It was my most fun trip was a motorhome trip with my family that all the kids hated except for Hannah because she barely remembers it. Not kidding. A different story for a different day. But back to Burning Man, where you've got all these people coming together and they're spending a week together with people they don't know. And by the way, all of the art and all the things that are going on, you can look up the 10 tenets of Burning Man. There are 10 things they live by philosophically and physically. There's a deal not having money. You trade, you barter. As a matter of fact, one of the things you can do is offer a conversation for a drink. And I'm going to be honest with you. Having spent a lot of my time in life in establishments with adults who like to drink and talk.
Right.
If somebody came and told me, hey, man, give me a drink of that and we'll talk. I'll be like, I'll give you a drink of that if you leave, if you go over there and talk to them. But that's what Burning Man is all about. And at the end of the week, they bring art there and show off. And they had some really big stuff over the years. Now, was it 2 years ago they had a flood? A year or two ago, there was a massive storm.
It was a nightmare. Yeah.
Yeah. But now you're talking about they've recovered from the horrible storm. Now you've got 70,000 people there and they've been partying all week, had a lot of fun, met new friends, started new relationships, and they've got their art they're getting ready to burn because they destroy it. The whole idea is you build it, you show it off, and you destroy it. Now, they do take a few things back. Some people just can't do it. I hope I could, but I don't know that I would,
Yeah.
And burning it is a way of really etching it in your mind of something you did and realizing that it has no value. And I love that thought. It is.
No, actually, it is a very cool thought that a lot of the temporal stuff in this life doesn't really have a lot of value. Right. And it's the moments that you spend with people that you care about. And
exactly.
I don't know. I think we talk about that to a great degree on Body Bags. We touch on the fragility of life and how suddenly it can all end and come to an end right quick, as a matter of fact. But can you imagine indwelling a space and for a week And maybe you know the victim, you've seen him about, because this guy, he's an artist, and he had actually gone out to construct one of these structures that was art. He's an artist, and had spent time doing it. And from what I understand, it was rather large, and you want people to take notice of it. But
right.
can you just for a second transport yourself to the finders? And we've talked about who a finder is previously on body bags. Who the finder was. They may have seen the victim. They may have spoken with him. Maybe they shared one of those drinks that you mentioned. Okay. But then as the thing comes to a finale at about 9:00 that night, this individual who is the finder looks down at their feet, and an individual is motionless. And what do they see? Well, they see what police have characterized as a significant pool of blood. And it was the initiative of the person that was the finder. There were sheriff's deputies around, and trying to flag down a sheriff's deputy and get them over there to assess this person. Now,
it's at night too, right?
Yeah, it's at night. It's like 9 p.m. when this went down, when this individual was discovered. So let's just talk about logistics here just for a second. If you're in the life protecting and life-saving business, can you imagine how much has to go into getting someone from a scene that is so isolated where they don't even have cell service, Dave? They don't have cell service in this area, to try to get them to some facility that could save their life. And are you going to have those types of resources on site? Because I got to tell you, the reason she saw a pool of blood, as it turns out, and according to authorities that has just been released in the last few days, he had a large, sharp force injury, singular, to his throat. Now, wow. Got to tell you, if someone has had a blade inserted into their neck, that might be, other than stabbing somebody directly in the heart, that might be the most lethal area you could ever attack somebody in. And here's why. The vessel structures that are contained in all of the organs of the neck that kind of rope their way around and snake through, and you've got venous return, you've got arterial delivery, not to mention you've got an airway. There are so many critical areas in the neck that just by clipping one of these areas, you think about the carotid, you think about the jugular vein, you're going to bleed out. And I don't care if you had, and I've said this before, but I don't care if you've got highly skilled surgeons that are standing by and you've got units of blood that you can hang. There's a high probability this is going to be unsurvivable, even if they've gotten to him in time. You think about applying direct pressure, all those things to kind of stem the blood flow that's coming out of this body. What are you going to do? This is not like you've got a cut on the back of your hand where you can wrap it up, apply pressure, and we're going to get you to the emergency room. Might be an hour or so, but we'll get you there. They'll be able to examine it, stitch you up, and maybe if you need surgery, that can be done. No. That's not what we're talking about. Out of all of the locations on the human body that you could sustain an injury, the fact that you take a knife to the neck is, I think that it goes relative to the attacker in this case. There's a real sense of purpose, of lethality here. It's not like you swung the knife and kind of sliced at them. This is you actually approached the individual and inserted them.
This is a prison shiv, right?
Yeah. I mean, right into their neck.
Wow.
So then you begin to think about, well, what in the world, and I would imagine investigators are asking this right now, what in the world what would have been their motivation for having taken this young man's life? I mean, he's only in his late 30s. He's an artist. I don't know if he had any confrontations with anybody out there. I don't know if someone didn't like his art. Someone didn't like him because maybe he was from Russia. I have no idea. And the thing about it is, out there, Dave, there are people that come there from all over the world, man.
Right. It's an art thing. I mean, beyond all the jokes that one might make about, communes and things like that, you're dealing with a world-renowned event that's been taking place for many years. 70,000 people in one spot for a week. That takes a lot of effort, a lot of time, and a lot of organization. And still, I'm thinking, if that's me, and let's just say it was accidental, Joe, somebody's messing around and boom, you get accidentally knifed. You're in the middle of 70,000 people all at night in the dark, in the middle of nowhere. And you said no cell phone, no Wi-Fi, no nothing. I'm thinking, do you hope and pray there's an 18-wheeler with a CB and somebody can connect to a base station? How do you get any help? I mean, I know they've got medics, but how do you get help for something like this in the middle of nowhere amongst thousands of people?
Yeah, and that's the rub here. And of course, that carries over, which we will get into, that carries over into crime scene management as well.
How do you start? How do you start with that, Joe? Because you mentioned the finder looks down and sees the guy in a puddle of blood. Okay, that's your finder?
And they have to track somebody down that's wearing a badge and a vest and a firearm that's just kind of standing there. Now, there were representatives from the local county sheriff's department. You also had individuals that were federal park rangers that are out there who are police officers as well. I actually talked to a student of mine, former student from my early days of teaching. And I will not say what agency he is with, but he's a federal police officer, and he was assigned to Burning Man many years ago. And he had reached out to me in a text message, and he said, "Have you been following this thing, out in at Burning Man?" And I was like, "Yeah, actually, I made a comment on television about it." He's like, "Yeah, when I worked out there many years ago, and I was assigned to do this," he said, "I got out there," and he was like, "How in the hell are we going to manage this?" Because you're kind of dropped down into this environment that has been chosen. You can try to plan for any kind of scenario relative to communication, relative to transport. You have to have resources and have somebody on alert. That's like, because when a population of 70,000 people, you have no idea what kind of medical histories are out there. They're going to be so varied. You might have people that have terminal events going on in their life. You might have people that have major drug problems. You might have people that are genetically predisposed. You might have people that have severe heart disease, and they just want to go out there and enjoy themselves. But it's going to be a mixed bag. So you have to be prepared. Are you going to be able to medevac somebody out of there? And what's the closest hospital you can get them to? And I'm sure that a lot of that stuff had been laid out. But when it comes to how do you plan for a homicide, and you've got the potential of 69,999 suspects, where do you go from there? So, Brother Dave, we know at this moment in time that there is no suspect that they have, at least that they've identified to this point, involving the homicide of Mr. Kruglov.
A very quick question.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. We know that he was found in a pool of blood.
Right.
Was he dead when they actually did find him?
I think that he was. And this is the other thing. If you've got this kind of injury, all right, you're going to die of what's referred to as exsanguination. And it's a $10 word that people in my field in medicine love to use, which means you bleed out. and there's no way to stem the flow. And I've had people, Dave, over the course of my career that have bled out from the slightest little injury. As a matter of fact, I was reviewing a case. I was teaching crime scene assessment the other day to one of my undergrad classes at Jack State, and I worked a case in Atlanta many years ago where two guys had gotten drunk, and the other guy took a folding pocket knife and merely stabbed his friend that was in the hotel room with him in the crook of his right arm. And that's also in medicine, they refer to that as the ACF. It's the antecubital fossa is the term, but it's the crook of the arm. And there's a network of vessels that pass through there. Matter of fact, a major vessel that runs through there as well. And he bled out simply from I think if I remember correctly, that wound in the crook of his arm may have been 2/3 of an inch in depth, and it killed him. He bled out there on the spot. So you never know. And then I've had cases where people had huge gaping injuries to their chest, and they survived for hours.
Right.
It didn't clip anything that was critical at that point in time. The wound might look absolutely horrible, but it's amazing, when you begin to think about sharp force injuries. We talk about sharp force injuries, and we have stabbings, just as like a quick review, a primer, if you will. We have stabbings and we have incised injuries. And so incised injuries are like slices. So they are shallow, but they're long most of the time. Stabbings, they're deep and concentrated. So you go into, and look, our friends are very bright that listen to the show. I think we've got the brightest audience out there. If you insert it into a specific area, there's a higher probability that deep within that anatomical structure, you've got a high probability of clipping something. As it turns out, at this scene, and one of the big reveals over the past few days is that authorities have now stated that they recovered a knife at the scene. And the knife is not a typical knife. We have been talking for years now about Idaho. And what were we talking about? K-bar, over and over and over and over again. When Idaho occurred, people were talking about Rambo knives.
Right.
They were talking about military knives. They hadn't absolutely identified anything yet. And of course, we found out that it was K-bar, which in fact is a lethal, specifically manufactured to kill people with for the military. Okay. Dave, the knife that they found is something that either you or I could go to any big box store and not go to the sporting goods section, but walk back into the home goods section and pick up a block of these knives. And they come in a block, and everybody's going to know what I'm talking about. It's these new ceramic style knives that they have. And they have everything that a standard steel knife set has. You've got a variety of different cutlery that are contained therein, but these things are made out of ceramics with a rubber handle, very sharp. They get the job done. And the knife that was actually utilized, and I think that this is a big key to solving this thing, is a kitchen knife that, if you'll just envision in your mind, this is the same style knife that you would use if you were on your cutting board and you're chopping up onions, or you're chopping up peppers, or you're preparing a meal with. It's got a very broad blade on it with a very sharp tip. It's a lime green. I don't know how else to describe it. Lime green, neon green, or whatever the case might be.
That was the murder weapon?
That was the murder weapon. So I got to tell you,
who has that kind of knife, Joe? I've never heard of them until you started telling me about it.
My Lord. Yeah, you've seen them. Trust me. You have seen these. Yeah. They're everywhere.
At a vegan's house, probably.
No. They are, people get them as wedding gifts, and they're ceramic. When you see these things, they really stand out. It's like it's like if you misplaced it in the kitchen, it wouldn't be misplaced long. You'd be like, where'd I put my knife? And it's like glowing on the counter.
wow.
They're that brilliant, when you see it. And so what does that tell me as an investigator? Well, do you remember?
I gotta know, because what it tells me is that I don't own those knives, so I'm not it.
You're on the Christmas list. It's heading your way. So Santa Claus is right around the corner, brother. Okay, so in this particular case, I believe that this knife was potentially a weapon of convenience. Now, what did we say? People show up and they manufacture a city out of nothing, and they bring their domestic baubles with them out there. What am I going to need in order to survive for a week? Am I going to need a gas stove? Am I going to need a generator? Because, in the words of Blanche Dubois, you're not going to be able to be dependent upon the kindness of strangers.
Right.
Even though you have exchange that will take place and you're bartering for things, you want to come prepared. Well, what are you going to bring? Well, let's just say that you love onions, all right, and you're going to cook up some meal that contains onions. Well, you need something to chop them up with. Oh, yeah. In my camper, I've got this block of lime green knives that I purchased at Sam's or Wholesale Club, BJ's Wholesale Club, or you name it, Walmart, it doesn't matter. And they've got these things sitting in their camper. Well, why is it that somebody would draw this knife out of the block that you would have it inserted into and take it out there and thrust it through the neck of this poor fellow that's an artist that's been, creating things out there in the middle of the desert for an entire week? Why is it? It's not like they went to some major sporting goods store, Dave,
right,
and literally went out and bought a K-bar or bought a survival knife. That's not what this is. No. This smacks of somebody that's there in a domestic situation, temporary domestic situation, that has this knife at their convenience. And interestingly enough, I would see, when I would work cases in both Atlanta and New Orleans involving homeless people, I did come across homeless people that would arm themselves with like steak knives. And they would use them for a variety of things. Even sailors that are on boats years and years ago, and I maybe today, I'm not a sailor, I'm an old soldier, but they have the utility of having a knife on their belt because there's all kinds of things you have to do. You have to cut things with it. You have to pry things open. That's you wouldn't use this knife in order to build something with. It wouldn't last very long. Yeah.
I wouldn't have that knife. I mean, no, it looks like something that'd be great in the kitchen and only in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Like, I have knives that, pardon me, when I'm leaving the house to go fishing or doing something, I don't carry a knife like that. I carry a knife that folds. I do have a long one. I do have a Rambo knife with it. I've got my little screw with the compass and the string and my survival knife just in case, because you never know what day you're going to have to jump off a cliff, land in a tree, and sew yourself up. It's something that could happen. And so I wouldn't have a knife like this on a temporary journey somewhere. Now, in my motorhome, Joe, my motorhome, I had stuff like this that was just for the motorhome. It wasn't for anything else. We didn't bring these in the house. This was just our motorhome stuff. It wasn't every day. It didn't get mixed in. And that includes plates, cups, coffee cups.
Everything. The whole nine yards. Yeah.
I had a different set of knives in the
I think most people operate that way. You buy it specifically for that, for your house on wheels, if you will.
Absolutely.
And so, when I saw that they had released this information, I'm not going to say it was like some huge epiphanal moment for me, but as an investigator, I would begin to think about, well, if I have the knife, can I track it down to a manufacturer? If it came from a specific manufacturer, then what was the lot number in which it was manufactured in? When was this thing manufactured? And what retailers sell this thing? Where do you go? Because, listen, first off, you've got a chaotic scene. I'm going to get into that in just a second. But when you think about 70,000 people, that's an estimate, all right?
Yeah.
70,000 people that are congregated in this one locale. Dude, as soon as this thing is over with, they're in the wind. They're gone.
What do you do with the crime scene, Joe?
Well,
how do you stake it out? Don't leave. Look, if you come to my house because I'm laying dead, the first thing you're doing is everybody stand still. Nobody move.
Yeah.
If you're in a bar investigating a stabbing, everybody that was here when it happened, get back up here, hands against the wall. I mean, it's you're going to remove
the witnesses, but this is the nightmare that the police are faced with. How do you corral? And can you imagine? You've got a very limited number of law enforcement officers out there. I don't know how many of these guys in rural Nevada have ever worked a homicide, much less a park ranger, a federal park ranger. No disrespect. I've met some that are lovely people and they do a great job. And it's a dangerous job because they work in isolation. Yeah, but it's not like you're, you've got let's just say it this way. It's not like you have Las Vegas or Clark County Sheriff's Office with their entire homicide division.
Right.
That's going to show up and work this case.
They don't have the mobile command unit that's coming out there in 10 minutes.
No. And this little sheriff's office up there might very well have, and they probably had something set up like that. But how are you? It's just the idea, the overwhelming, it's like the old adage, spitting in the ocean doesn't do too much good to raise the water level, so you think about that, and it would be the one word that comes to mind would be bewildering. I think just from a human standpoint, if you're the investigator and you're looking around, you're thinking, oh my Lord, how are we going to ever manage? And it's not like this is something that happens on an island that's isolated that no one's ever going to talk about. Suddenly, this little jurisdiction has the entire eyes of the world on it. Okay? This is a festival that has been going on for years and years and years and years. People want to know. And can you imagine the calls that these people are getting?
Wow.
They want to know what's going on. Are you going to track this down? Are you going to track that down? Here's another thing. There's a couple of things along the way. I'm kind of on a roll right now, but when you think, because it's so, even as I'm sitting here, I think my heart rate is increasing a little bit.
Right.
You begin to think crime scene management. You made a good point just a second ago, Dave, about how do you cordon this area off? How do you secure it? Because that's the underpinning of everything we do in death scene investigations. We secure the perimeter of the scene. Well, the big question is, how big is your perimeter going to be, dude? How big is this thing going to be? How far out are you going to expand it? And to boot, this is happening at night. Are you going to look for blood trails on this dirty desert surface? Is there going to be anything there? Do you have any evidence that somebody walked away and they've got blood dripping up? Were they injured? Well, they certainly didn't carry the knife off with them. They left it there. So did this individual have any kind of blood that was on them that was, that may, if he clipped an artery, you might have arterial spray, which given the volume of blood that they're talking about, that could have happened. But are you going to notice this individual in a crowd of people that I don't know what the bathroom facilities are like? I don't know if they have portable showers. There's probably a lot of people out there that are, I don't know, they're kind of funky by now.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to have a little bit of dirt on them. And this person just wanders off and disappears into the crowd. Now, I will say this. This gentleman actually had friends that were there, and they were native Russians as well. He had several friends that were there allegedly with him. They're going to be a source of information. I can almost dollars to donuts. I can guarantee you that the police have, because they're vested, they want to know who killed their friend, right?
That's one of them,
and they want to be able to explain it to his family over in Russia. And so they're going to be asking them, who was he interacting with when he was here? Was there anybody that popped up on your radar? Had you seen anybody walking around with a lime green neon knife at any point in time? Had he made mention of this sort of thing? I was really thinking about, well, could there be any transfer evidence on either him or more specifically on that knife? The first thing that really came to mind is going to be fingerprints, any kind of latent prints that are left behind on the surface of that knife. Now, would it be possible to lift them? Hard to say. The handle is actually rubber. I think that one of the things that they would have to do would probably be obviously secure that knife and get that knife to the crime lab as soon as they can. They would probably have to do super glue fuming on this thing so that when the super glue, you heat the super glue up and you put it actually in an aquarium. You kind of suspend it in the air. And as the super glue heats up, it falls back down it's in a vapor form, and it settles on those fatty lipids that are left behind, from our greasy fingertips. And you can capture a fingerprint that way. Is that possible?
Things I learned from watching 48 Hour. Beverly Hills Cop.
Yeah,
Axel had that down pat.
Yeah, he did. So it's so very complex. If you're thinking about footprints, forget it, because you got so much stuff that's commingled out there. People shuffling around. How long did he lay there? Were they able to do a postmortem interval measurement on him? When they actually do the assessment, because that goes back to, well, first off, we would have to establish a baseline. When did somebody last see this guy living and breathing? When was the last time somebody spoke with him? I cannot fathom in my mind a case recently where that bit of information is so important. It's exemplified in this case because that's going to be key to this. And then you marry that up with what you're finding, on the body. What's the body telling you about what happened? I don't know. It's a huge mess. I got to tell you, a tip of the cap to the police that are working this. It's very easy, obviously, to come up with a cause and certainly a manner of this. In this case, they ruled the manner as a homicide, as well it should be. This guy did not stab himself in the neck. They're out there actively looking, but the problem is that where do you begin? Where do you begin to find a suspect? Is there any physical evidence that was left behind on either the victim's body, on this instrument, or was there any kind of circumstantial evidence associated with conversations that he had, things that were overheard, or maybe something that an eyewitness picked up on? I don't know. I can tell you this, though. We're going to stay up to speed on this case, and Brother Dave and I are going to come back, and we'll give you an update as soon as we know more. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.